You've just moved your grandfather clock, and now you want to get it set up running. I'm Logan with Low Steam Clockworks, and let me tell you how to do that. This is something that you can hire somebody to do, but it's also something you can do yourself. Now, I do recommend whenever moving a clock to do a service, which means you would take out the movement, oil it, and stuff like that. Call a repairman to do that would be my recommendation. So anytime I move a clock, I make sure that I service it to make sure that it's going to work correctly. But let's say you've had that done already, or you aren't able to do it at the moment, and you just want to have it moved and unpack it yourself. Let me show you how you can do that. First thing, unwrap everything. And this should be wrapped up in blankets. You should have weights and a pendulum and key and crank somewhere. Make sure all that's unwrapped and ready to go. Next, we need to make sure that this case is stable and level. So if it rocks back and forth easily, then you need to make sure that there's something under those feet or that the feet are adjusted. Now, some of these clocks have leveling feet, which means that there's a foot underneath. It's a disc that sticks out just a little bit. If you see that, you should be able to spin that disc and make it come down or go up. It's got a threaded insert so that you can screw that foot down and screw it up and use that to level the clock or to stabilize it. I do recommend that you use a level to make sure it's level this way and level this way as well. That can be helpful. Now, it's not absolutely critical. What's most important is that it's in beat, which is the most important thing that we'll talk about later in this video. But helpful in general to make sure it's nice and level and stable. And I will say that if it's on carpet, you might have issues. Sometimes grandfather clocks on carpet do have issues, sometimes they don't. Basically what happens is that carpet absorbs the energy that needs to be transferred to the pendulum, so the pendulum loses its energy and ends up stopping. And a lot of the time you'll find that when the weights are about halfway down, halfway through the week, that's when things start to shake and you lose that energy. So watch out for that. If it does have to go on carpet, usually a piece of plywood or something like that will help to stabilize it. But all I have to say, make sure it's stable and that it's level. And then we're going to put the pendulum on. Now, on your pendulum, it's important to note that on all these shiny brass parts, pendulum weights, stuff like that, they tend to put a coating, a clear coat, that will prevent fingerprints. And sometimes it works pretty well, sometimes it doesn't. You can see here that we've got some fingerprints from bygone days. And so to avoid that, use gloves or a microfiber cloth or a towel or anything like that, just to keep from getting fingerprints on it. And that goes for any time you're handling your clock. Maybe it's got chains or weights. Good idea to protect it from fingerprints. Now, on your pendulum, you're going to have some type of a hook or a hole through the end of it or something like that. Some sort of thing that will hook onto something inside the clock. Now, it's going to hook on back inside here. There's a rod that hangs down behind the guts and in front of the steel chime rods that stick down. These are the chime rods in front of that. It's called the leader rod. The leader rod is what this pendulum hooks to, and it will have the corresponding puzzle piece to whatever's here. Now, it's really common when a clock is moved for that leader rod to get shifted or get in a bind or jostled, something like that. So just take a look at it. Make sure that it doesn't look like it's fallen off of anything or that it's missing or anything like that. And also, when you're going to put your pendulum on, make sure that you don't bump that leader rod such that it falls off and gets in a bind. Alright, now that's hooked on. And the next step is to put the weights on. Now, before you do that, let me save you some trouble. When you pick up that heavy weight and you only have one hand left, you'll realize that this pulley is not in the correct orientation. And then you'll only have one hand, and it's complicated and it takes a long time. So save yourself some trouble. And before you pick up a weight, look at these. Now, these are probably tied up inside somewhere, so just make sure it's all untied and free. And you can see that this pulley has like a loop over the top, kind of the pivot, if you will, and that is not correct. This is upside down. You want this cable to be going around the pulley. So we're going to flip this pulley over, like so. And now that pulley has the cable going around it, and hanging down from it is this loop that the weight is going to hook onto. There's either a loop or a hook or something like that hanging down. So now that that's done, I grab my weight and take the hook on the weight and hook it onto that loop, like so. Now another important thing to note when you're looking at your weights is that they should have some type of label on them. You can see this one has the letter C for center. This one has an L for left, and the other one has an R for right. So they'll either have that, or it might say left, middle, center. It might have sticky labels that say the word left, center, and right, something along those lines. It may say S, T, and C for strike, time, and chime, left, center, right. Or it might be ST for strike train, TT for time train, and CT for chime train. Same idea, left, center, right is telling you which one goes where. If it doesn't say, sometimes they don't have labels, either they're all the same weights and it doesn't matter what goes where, or one of them is heavier than the other two. And the rule of thumb is that the heavier one goes on the far right. Now, since this is my weight labeled C, I'm going to put it on the center for the time. And for the sake of video, I'm not going to do the other weight right now. But now that that weight is on, we can check the most important thing, which is the beat. The beat is the heartbeat of your clock. It's the tick-tock, tick-tock. If it sounds like it's galloping like a horse, going tick-tick, 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 your clock will probably stop running within a few minutes or a few days. So it needs to tick evenly like a metronome. Tick, 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 tick. So just give your pendulum a little nudge until you hear it click. Tick. Some of them are very quiet, hard to hear, so you might need to get up close. A lot of modern grandfather clocks have a self-adjusting beat. That means you just give the pendulum a big swing, just take it and hold it kind of close to the glass and let it go, and it will self-adjust. I don't really like those because they don't tend to get very close, so it's even if you have a self-adjusting one, it's helpful to still listen to it yourself and try to adjust it. Now, like I said, it should be beating evenly. And if it's not, just play with it, give it a little nudge one way or the other. Now if you hear it going tick tick, tick tick, then you need to push it that way. So we're just going to push it over. Usually if you touch the glass, barely brush up against it, that's too far most of the time. So just get it kind of close to the glass and see what happens. And then if it's, now if it's going tick tick, tick tick on this side, then let's move it this way just a little bit. And then see if it gets better, if it gets worse. If it gets better, keep going. If it gets worse, try the other way. And keep playing with it until you get it nice and centered, and you should hear that even tick-tock, tick-tock. And then set your time, and of course don't forget your moon dial. Now, what is a moon dial? This is one of the common questions I get. Well, this tells you the lunar cycle of the moon, when it's a full moon and when it's a new moon. And it'll go around from 1 to 29.5, because there's 29.5 days in a lunar month. Now, I'm sure back in the day this was helpful for knowing when to plant your crops or whatever. Not quite so helpful today, but it's still a neat novelty. Maybe you don't care, and that's fine, just leave it. But if you want it to be accurate, look up when the last full moon was. So this is the way, there's a few ways to do it. This is what I find the easiest to remember. So here's the full moon. And say the last full moon was 3 days ago, then just go 1, 2, 3, and now you're there. And you can just touch that and move it. Some of them you can only move one direction to the right. Some you can move both ways. In this case, you can move it either way. But that's how you set the moon dial. And of course, with the hands, most modern grandfather clocks, you can go forward or backwards as many times as you need to. Be careful, they aren't all like that, so you might have to go forward only, and with some of the complicated ones, you have to go forward and wait for it to chime every time. If it looks like this, you're probably fine. But just be aware that there are a few other complications. And of course, most grandfather clocks have multiple melodies that they can do, so look over here and see if you've got a silent Westminster, St. Michael's, Whittington in this case. Some of them will have a strike on or off over on this side. That way you can silence it so that if you have guests sleeping in your living room with the clock, they don't have to hear that all night, because some people can't sleep to the sound of clocks making noise. I understand. But anyway, you can adjust your melodies there, you can turn them off, and now you got that. Last thing to note is that if your clock tends to run slow or fast, you can adjust that. So you come back in a week and it's 5 o'clock and it says 5:30. Well, you need to slow it down. Rule of thumb is lower is slower, left is lower. So that's talking about the pendulum bob here. So if you're going too fast, you need to lower that to make it go slower. And to do that, this nut down at the bottom needs to go to the left. Lower is slower and left is lower. Turn that to the left as you look at it here, and it'll go slower. Turn it to the right, and it will make the clock go faster. So that should be all you need to know to take your clock, unpack it, and get it operating correctly, running in beat, and running accurate time. Hope that helps, and we'll see you guys next time.